once a shield for German defenders, became a proving ground for armored innovation. Sherman tanks, moving in coordinated units, exploited gaps and engaged enemy positions with precision. Yet the visible strength of the armored units was only one part of a larger equation. The unseen communication network within and between tanks defined their operational effectiveness. Training had prepared tank crews for this reality. From the outset of U.S. armor doctrine, crews were drilled to operate as integrated teams. Radio operators were assigned to each Sherman, responsible not only for transmitting orders, but for maintaining situational awareness. Commanders could monitor multiple tanks simultaneously, relay adjustments, and synchronize movements across miles of battlefield terrain. Infantry liaison officers and artillery forward observers complemented this network, ensuring that every Sherman was connected to the wider combat formation. The Germans, by contrast, often relied on a fragmented communication system. Many Panzer units had only partial radio coverage, with some vehicles dependent on signal flags, runners, or verbal commands. The result was slower response times, misinterpreted orders, and a lack of coordinated flexibility. When American Shermans spotted a concealed anti-tank gun or ambush, it could immediately call for supporting fire or maneuver reinforcements. German crews, even when aware of the threat, frequently found themselves reacting to a situation that had already evolved beyond their control. The operational implications were profound. During the breakout from Normandy, multiple engagements demonstrated the radio's decisive role. In the hedgerow country near St. Lo, a series of coordinated flanking maneuvers allowed Shermans to bypass heavily defended positions while maintaining offensive pressure. Radio communication enabled company commanders to adjust tank formations on the fly, respond to German counterattacks, and keep infantry units in sync. The speed and fluidity of these maneuvers created a psychological impact. German defenders perceived the Americans as being everywhere at once, striking with precision in multiple directions simultaneously. The impact extended beyond tactical engagements. Shermans equipped with advanced radios allowed for the creation of mobile command posts within the armored columns. Battalion and regimental commanders could maintain direct oversight of operations in real time. Reports of enemy positions, artillery strikes, and reconnaissance findings could be relayed immediately, enabling predictive adjustments rather than reactive measures. This level of coordination meant that operational tempo no longer depended solely on terrain or weather, but on information flow and decision-making speed. Moreover, the radios enhanced the logistical efficiency of armored operations. Tanks required fuel, ammunition, and maintenance, all coordinated across a sprawling battlefield. Radio networks allowed tank commanders to report consumption, mechanical issues, or combat damage instantly. Supply units could prioritize deliveries, reroute convoys, and ensure that the front lines never stalled. The Sherman's operational range and persistence were amplified not only by mechanical reliability, but by the flow of information guiding resupply and reinforcement. German reconnaissance increasingly noted the difference. Field reports from Panzer divisions described American armored units moving with cohesion and flexibility that seemed beyond expectation. Where German forces anticipated isolated assaults or predictable tank routes, they encountered synchronized columns adjusting formations mid-engagement. The psychological toll was tangible. Commanders worried not only about the Sherman's firepower, but about their communication capability, which seemed to render any defensive calculation obsolete. By the end of August 1944, the broader operational picture was clear. The Sherman's radios had shifted the balance of armored warfare. Their ability to see, communicate, and act collectively allowed American forces to maintain pressure, exploit weaknesses, and sustain momentum over extended distances. The integration of communication, maneuver, and firepower transformed what might have been a slow, attritional advance into a rapid, coordinated offensive. In essence, the Sherman tank was not just a weapon system, but a networked node in a living battlefield organism. It combined mechanical reliability, human skill, and advanced communications into a force capable of outpacing German expectations. This combination would soon demonstrate its full effect during the breakout from Normandy and the subsequent race across France, where speed, coordination, and operational awareness determined the outcome of battles and the tempo of the entire campaign. At the heart of the Sherman's effectiveness was the crew. Tank commanders, gunners, loaders, drivers, and radio operators worked as a tightly coordinated team. Each man had a role that demanded precision, awareness, and split-second decision-making. The radio operator, in particular, was crucial. Positioned beside the commander, he maintained continuous contact with adjacent tanks and higher echelons. Every call, coordinates, warnings, or requests for support traveled across the battlefield in real time. Crews endured long hours inside steel hulls, navigating mud, craters, and the deafening roar of artillery. Exhaustion was constant, yet the radios allowed them to act collectively, sharing situational awareness that mitigated fatigue and errors. The human element was inseparable from the machine. Skill, discipline, and trust transformed the Sherman into an extension of its crew's cognition. Tactical angle, the radios fundamentally reshaped armored tactics. Whereas German panzers often advanced in isolated or loosely coordinated groups, Shermans operated as network formations capable of flexible maneuvers. Units could execute flanking operations, retreat and regroup, or concentrate fire on priority targets, all coordinated by instant communication. During the Normandy breakout, multiple engagements demonstrated this advantage. When one company encountered a well-defended hedgerow, radio coordination allowed nearby units to adjust their approach, enveloping the enemy while avoiding frontal attrition. This networked capability converted tactical opportunities into decisive action, forcing German commanders to respond to dynamic, coordinated threats rather than predictable attacks. Technological angle, the radios themselves represented cutting-edge technology for 1944. Sherman tanks were equipped with SCR 508 or SCR 528 sets, offering both voice communication and, in some units, encrypted signaling. These radios had a range sufficient to maintain command cohesion across several kilometers, even in disrupted terrain. Coupled with standardized channels and disciplined operating procedures, they allowed real-time sharing of intelligence, fire control instructions, and maneuver orders. Unlike many German tanks, which relied on visual signals or intermittent telephone lines, Shermans could adapt to changing battlefield conditions instantly. The technology amplified human decision-making, effectively extending commanders' reach and situational awareness beyond line-of-sight limitations. Leadership Angle Patton's command style leveraged the Sherman's communication advantage. He emphasized speed, audacity, and flexibility, and he understood that such tactics demanded instantaneous information flow. Field commanders were empowered to make rapid decisions, knowing they could communicate adjustments across the formation. Orders were no longer static directives, but dynamic guidance that evolved in response to enemy movements. Leadership at every echelon adapted to this reality. Company, battalion, and regimental commanders coordinated maneuvers in real time, blending initiative with centralized intent. The radios enabled a command philosophy in which speed and coordination became inseparable. Decision-making accelerated, and operational tempo increased beyond what traditional hierarchical control could achieve. Enemy perspective angle for German forces, the Sherman's communication capabilities were baffling and intimidating. Intelligence reports from Panzer divisions highlighted the difficulty in anticipating American maneuvers. Tanks that appeared to act independently were in fact part of a tightly coordinated network. German observers often noted that artillery strikes seemed perfectly timed. Infantry support arrived, just as needed, and tanks flanked with uncanny precision. The perception of omnipresence sowed confusion and eroded morale. German commanders struggled to identify the center of gravity in engagements, as the Americans' ability to communicate, coordinate, and adjust in real time created an operational rhythm the Germans could neither predict nor match. Moral angle beyond tactics and technology, There was a moral dimension to the Sherman's radios. Crews gained confidence and cohesion from knowing they were connected, capable of calling for support or warning allies of danger. This psychological reassurance was invaluable in chaotic combat conditions. The radios reduced isolation, mitigated panic, and fostered collective problem-solving under stress. Soldiers who might otherwise have hesitated in isolated circumstances acted decisively because they knew they were part of an integrated, responsive force. Morale, often overlooked in assessments of battlefield technology, became a force multiplier. Communication was not merely functional. It sustained the human will to advance under fire. The integration of radios into Sherman operations exemplified operational innovation. Combined arms coordination became far more fluid, linking infantry, artillery, and armor into a synchronized force. Reconnaissance units could relay real-time intelligence, allowing tank formations to adjust routes, avoid ambushes, or concentrate firepower precisely where needed. Supply columns could anticipate demands, and medevac operations could be coordinated with minimal delay. This operational connectivity meant that the battlefield extended beyond visual range. Command and support structures became virtual extensions of each tank crew, translating data into action faster than the enemy could respond. Engineering and maintenance angle. The effectiveness of Sherman radios depended not only on the hardware itself, but on dedicated maintenance and engineering protocols. Signal technicians accompanied armored units, performing inspections, tuning frequencies, and troubleshooting failures under combat conditions. Crews were trained to conduct basic repairs, replace components, and maintain batteries in the field. The combination of rugged design and disciplined maintenance ensured continuous operation despite dust, moisture, and mechanical shock. This reliability transformed the radios from experimental tools into indispensable operational assets, making communication a predictable constant in a chaotic battlefield environment. Combined arms coordination angle communication allowed Shermans to synchronize not just with other tanks, but across multiple branches of the Allied force. Artillery could adjust fire based on tank reconnaissance. Infantry could maneuver under armor cover with guidance from radio updates. Engineers could anticipate obstacles and repair routes in time for advancing columns. During the breakout from Normandy, this multi-layered coordination proved decisive. German forces faced threats that seemed omnipresent. Tanks attacking from one flank, artillery suppressing another, infantry closing in, all moving with cohesion enabled by rapid, reliable communication. Radios turned disparate units into a cohesive operational organism. Enemy misperception angled German troops repeatedly underestimated the Americans' ability to coordinate armored actions. Reports describe Panzer officers attempting to exploit perceived gaps, only to encounter units reacting instantly, redirecting fire, or reinforcing vulnerable sectors. To the Germans, these movements appeared preternaturally well-timed, fostering the illusion of superior numbers or foresight. In reality, it was the Sherman's radios that allowed commanders to adjust dynamically, translating real-time intelligence into immediate tactical action. Enemy misperception amplified the psychological impact of technology, compounding the material advantage with uncertainty, hesitation, and morale erosion. Logistical integration angle radios also improved the flow of supplies and support. Field depots, fuel trucks, and artillery resupply units could be informed of unit positions and anticipated needs. Tanks signaling low ammunition or fuel could trigger immediate logistical responses, reducing downtime and maintaining operational tempo. The Sherman's advanced communications effectively shortened the feedback loop between front lines and support infrastructure, creating a seamless cycle of action and reinforcement. In a campaign where speed and sustained pressure were decisive, the integration of radios into the logistical network ensured that tactical gains were not lost to supply bottlenecks. Strategic implication angle. The strategic impact of Sherman radios extended beyond individual engagements. By enabling rapid, cohesive movement across the battlefield, they allowed Allied commanders to execute broader operational plans with confidence. Large-scale maneuvers, such as the encirclement of German forces in the Falaise pocket, depended on the timely relay of intelligence and orders. Radios ensured that these maneuvers could be coordinated across miles of contested terrain, transforming strategic intent into executable action. This technological edge forced German planners to contend with an operational tempo they could neither predict nor match, accelerating the collapse of defensive positions and hastening Allied advances. Early August 1944, Normandy, France. The morning sun burned through misty fields of Normandy. Tanks rumbled over hedgerows, the air heavy with the scent of gasoline and churned earth. American Sherman crews, radios crackling, adjusted formations on the fly. Orders transmitted in real time allowed columns to pivot, flank, and concentrate fire with unprecedented precision. German defenders, entrenched behind rubble and hedgerows, braced for the assault, unaware that their positions were being continuously mapped and reported back to American commanders. For the first time, the Shermans were not isolated units acting independently. They were nodes in a network, each tank a relay station for information, observation, and command. In one hedgerow near Corentin, a platoon commander intercepted intelligence from a reconnaissance unit spotting a German 88mm battery. The information traveled instantly across the armored column. Artillery prepared to suppress a barrage, and tanks maneuvered into enfilade fire positions. Within minutes, the German guns were neutralized, and infantry advanced behind armored cover. What would have taken hours using traditional signal flags and couriers was now accomplished in real time. The psychological effect on the German troops was immediate. Reports flooded Panzer Command. American tanks were coordinating with a precision that suggested omnipresence. Attempts to launch counterattacks were preempted by Sherman units arriving at unexpected coordinates. Field reports described bewilderment. Officers could not anticipate the enemy's movements, and infantry units were pinned or outflanked before they could react. The radio's silent, invisible power reshaped the battlefield, turning communication into a decisive instrument of war. Mid-August, Avalanche breakout. By mid-August, Patton's Third Army exploited the breakthrough at Avalanche. Armored columns surged south, racing along cracked roads and sun-scorched fields. Every Sherman was linked by radio to company and battalion command, transmitting fuel levels, ammunition status, enemy sightings, and movement orders. The speed of coordination was staggering. Tanks that would have been isolated and vulnerable now operated as cohesive units, covering each other, coordinating attacks, and calling in artillery support within seconds. Near Mortain, German panzer divisions attempted to cut the American advance. They expected disorganization and delays. Instead, Sherman crews maneuvered in unison, responding to intelligence from forward scouts. A tank platoon detected a German flank movement and relayed the coordinates. Within minutes, reinforcements arrived, suppressing the threat. What seemed miraculous to the Germans was a direct consequence of technological integration, meticulous planning, and disciplined crew training. Radios had turned individual tanks into a synchronized strike force, capable of instant tactical adaptation. Late August, Falaise pocket encirclement. By late August, the culmination of Allied strategy centered on the Falaise pocket. The objective was to encircle retreating German forces, cutting off escape routes and collapsing their defensive lines. Radio-equipped Shermans were critical to this operation. Columns advancing from the north and south maintained constant communication, ensuring that junction points were reached simultaneously. Intelligence on German troop movements was relayed immediately, allowing rapid adjustment of positions and preventing gaps in the encirclement. In one instance, a Sherman company commander spotted a German convoy attempting to retreat through a forested pass. He transmitted coordinates and intercepted signals from another column. Coordinated fire from artillery, tanks, and infantry effectively blocked the escape, trapping hundreds of enemy troops. To the Germans, it appeared as though the Americans were everywhere at once. The tactical advantage conferred by real-time communication had become operational dominance, human and mechanical synergy. Throughout these operations, the human element amplified the radio's effectiveness. Crews adjusted swiftly to commands, navigated treacherous terrain, and maintained continuous vigilance. Maintenance teams ensured radios remained functional despite vibrations, dust, and gunfire. Engineers replaced antennas and batteries under fire, often improvising repairs to sustain operational tempo. Each successful engagement relied on the seamless integration of human skill, mechanical reliability, and technological advantage. By the end of August 1944, the combined effect of Sherman radios, well-trained crews, and coordinated tactics had become unmistakable. Patton's forces advanced at a pace that Germans could neither predict nor counter. Communication had transformed from a supporting function into a battlefield multiplier. Where German troops had once held confidence in numerical and positional advantage, they now faced the relentless reality of an opponent whose coordination, speed, and flexibility exceeded expectations. The first phase of the climax demonstrates a clear pattern. Tactical ingenuity magnified by technological advantage, operational synergy between tanks and infantry, and the psychological shock inflicted on an enemy unprepared for such instantaneous coordination. Each engagement reinforced the next, building momentum and setting the stage for the decisive encirclements and breakthroughs that would define the final weeks of the campaign. The next section will show the full consequences of this technological edge. How German forces crumbled under pressure, retreats became chaotic, and the Sherman tank, with its advanced radios, reshaped the European battlefield entirely. The dawn of September brought a blazing sun over the shattered roads of northern France. Patton's columns moved with relentless precision. Sherman tanks, radios humming, transmitted updates on enemy positions, fuel levels, and terrain obstacles. Each unit operated as part of a dynamic, responsive network, adjusting on the fly to developments hundreds of meters or even miles away. The Germans, still reeling from fillets, struggled to coordinate their scattered units. Reports described officers shouting orders over the roar of artillery, only to discover that American forces had anticipated their moves. The radios inside the Sherman tanks were deceptively advanced for their time. They allowed tank-to-tank, tank-to-infantry, and tank-to-artillery communication, enabling combined arms coordination that the Germans could neither intercept nor counter effectively. In one scenario near Metz, an American armored battalion coordinated a flanking maneuver while simultaneously calling in artillery to suppress German strongpoints. The operation executed flawlessly, with tanks maintaining formation, infantry advancing without exposure, and artillery fire precisely timed to neutralize enemy positions. The Germans, attempting to reinforce their lines, found themselves consistently outmaneuvered. The shock on German command. German generals, accustomed to predicting Allied advances based on supply lines, troop movements, and delayed communications, were confronted with a new reality. American units were no longer constrained by traditional coordination methods. Sherman crews, connected by radios, acted in concert across the battlefield. Tactical decisions that once required hours now occurred in minutes. The psychological toll on German troops was profound. Commanders reported confusion, frustration, and disbelief. American forces seemed omnipresent, appearing at unexpected points and consistently overwhelming defensive positions. In intercepted communications, German officers lamented their inability to anticipate Sherman movements. The speed and accuracy of American coordination rendered many defensive strategies obsolete. Retreats, once orderly and deliberate, devolved into chaotic withdrawals. German infantry units abandoned positions prematurely, artillery crews failed to redeploy in time, and panzer divisions found themselves isolated, outflanked, and cut off. The radios in the Sherman tanks had transformed the battlefield into a fluid, dynamic environment, where speed, coordination, and real-time intelligence dictated outcomes. Technological superiority as a force multiplier. The radios were more than tools. They were force multipliers. Their presence allowed commanders at all levels to maintain situational awareness, rapidly adjust tactics, and synchronize attacks. Tanks could coordinate enfilade fire, infantry could exploit gaps, and artillery could suppress threats before they fully materialized. Mechanized units advanced with unprecedented cohesion, turning what would have been piecemeal attacks into concentrated, devastating offensives. The Germans, accustomed to slower, fragmented engagements, were overwhelmed by this speed and flexibility. Maintenance crews played an equally critical role. Radios susceptible to dust, vibration, and battle damage required constant attention. Engineers repaired components under fire, replaced antennas, and ensured batteries remained charged. This diligence allowed uninterrupted communication across extended operations, sustaining the operational tempo that became Patton's hallmark. Without these human efforts, the technological advantage would have been compromised, but with them, the battlefield became a testament to the integration of man, machine, and strategy. Falaise to the Moselle, unstoppable momentum. As September progressed, Sherman-equipped divisions pursued retreating German forces toward the Moselle River. Coordination through radios allowed simultaneous attacks along multiple axes, creating dilemmas German commanders could not solve. Retreat routes were cut off, positions were flanked before defensive preparations were complete, and panic spread among German units. American units reported pockets of surrender where troops, realizing they could not outmaneuver or outfight an enemy moving with such precision, laid down arms. In one illustrative episode, a Sherman platoon intercepted reports of a German counterattack near a crossroads. Using radio coordination, they directed neighboring units to reinforce key positions while calling in artillery on advancing columns. The Germans, attempting to consolidate, found themselves trapped between converging forces. Hundreds of troops surrendered, artillery was captured, and the American advance continued without pause. Radios had turned tactical intelligence into operational dominance. Human dimension under pressure. The human factor magnified the radio's effectiveness. Crews operated under extreme heat, dust, and a constant threat of enemy fire. Rapid communication reduced uncertainty, but it also demanded focus, coordination, and split-second decision-making. Drivers, gunners, and commanders internalized new procedures, learning to respond instantly to information from units they could not see. Maintenance teams, often working under fire, ensured that the electronic lifeline remained intact. Each successful maneuver reflected not only technological advantage, but also human ingenuity, resilience, and disciplined execution. End of September. Strategic consequences. By the end of September 1944, the impact of Sherman radios was unmistakable. German units, scattered and demoralized, had been consistently outmaneuvered. Retreats became routes. Counterattacks were anticipated and neutralized, and the operational tempo of the Allied advance reached unprecedented levels. Commanders noted that communication, often overlooked in planning, had become decisive. Tanks could fight, maneuver, and exploit vulnerabilities with real-time intelligence unavailable to any other army. The climax of this technological edge was not a single engagement, but a cascade of successes. Falaise, Avranches, Metz, and the Moselle campaigns all demonstrated that effective communication could dictate the rhythm of battle, amplify firepower, and render traditional defensive strategies ineffective. Sherman radios had transformed not only tactical engagements, but also operational strategy, accelerating the Allied advance and forcing German forces into a continuous reactive posture. By October 1944, the consequences of Sherman tank radios were evident across northern France and the Western Front. American armored units had moved faster, coordinated more efficiently, and struck with precision that German forces could not match. Commanders on both sides recognized that the battlefield had fundamentally changed. Whereas traditional engagements depended on line of sight, pre-planned maneuvers, and delayed communication, American units now operated as a networked force, able to respond instantly to evolving situations. The German army struggled to adapt. Intelligence reports indicated a growing sense of disbelief within German high command. Their movements are faster than thought possible. One intercepted message read, "Officers documented repeated failures to mount counteroffensives, noting that tanks arrived in unexpected locations. Infantry coordinated with armored units seamlessly, and artillery responded to dynamically updated targets." Even elite panzer divisions, renowned for speed and coordination, found themselves reacting to events rather than shaping them. Operationally, the radios transformed the Sherman from a standalone fighting vehicle into a node within a vast tactical network. Units that would previously have acted independently could now operate collectively. Reconnaissance reports, ambush warnings, and real-time battle updates flowed through the communication system, allowing American commanders to redistribute forces, reinforce weak points, and exploit gaps in German lines. Tanks advanced in coordinated waves, infantry maneuvered to exploit exposed flanks, and artillery struck precisely when needed, all while maintaining momentum over hundreds of miles of battlefield. The human cost of this operational superiority was not insignificant. Sherman crews endured constant stress, prolonged combat, and relentless operational tempo. Radio operators, gunners, and commanders were required to maintain situational awareness while managing vehicle operation and coordinating with multiple units. Maintenance teams worked continuously, repairing radios under harsh conditions, ensuring uninterrupted communication. Letters and diaries from the period reveal exhaustion, yet also a sense of purpose. Crews understood that their coordination was decisive. Without reliable communication, the pace and effectiveness of the advance would have faltered. Strategically, the effect extended beyond individual battles. German forces, unable to predict or counter the coordinated maneuvers of American units, suffered a cumulative disadvantage. Retreats were often disorganized, supply lines were disrupted, and defensive positions were abandoned prematurely. The operational tempo achieved by the Allies forced the Germans into a continuous state of reaction, undermining morale and limiting their ability to regroup effectively. The integration of Sherman radios also influenced post-battle assessments and planning. American commanders recognized that the combination of mobility, firepower, and communication was a force multiplier. Tactical successes were no longer solely attributed to superior numbers or firepower, but to the ability to coordinate and adapt in real time. Reports from logistics and intelligence officers highlighted that the radios allowed armored units to exploit opportunities as they arose, creating decisive advantages in both minor skirmishes and major engagements. By the close of this phase, the psychological impact on German soldiers was profound. Accounts describe frustration and bewilderment. Their positions were outflanked, counterattacks were anticipated, and defenses were rendered ineffective by an invisible network of communication. Even when heavily armed units were present, they often failed to act cohesively, hampered by slower communication and command delays. The radios in Sherman tanks had effectively shifted the balance of tactical initiative, placing the Allies consistently one step ahead. The next section will continue the aftermath, focusing on the broader operational and strategic consequences of radio-equipped Shermans, including how this advantage influenced the final phases of the European campaign and reshaped modern armored warfare doctrine. As October gave way to November 1944, the full strategic impact of the Sherman radios became unmistakable. The Allied advance was no longer a series of isolated battles, but a fluid, continuous campaign shaped by instantaneous communication. Shermans equipped with radios allowed Patton's Third Army and other armored formations to execute rapid thrusts, envelop enemy positions, and exploit weaknesses with unprecedented precision. The ability to synchronize armor, infantry, and artillery turned what might have been static engagements into dynamic maneuvers, overwhelming German defensive strategies. German command acknowledged the transformation, albeit reluctantly. Intelligence reports repeatedly highlighted the speed, flexibility, and coordination of American armored units. Field diaries of German officers record repeated confusion at the apparent foresight of U.S. movements. Tanks seemed to anticipate obstacles, artillery strikes landed with precision, and infantry advances were perfectly timed. Even when numerical superiority existed on paper, German units struggled to counter the synchronized operations of radio-equipped Shermans. Conventional defensive doctrine, reliant on delayed orders and fragmented communication, proved insufficient against this new paradigm. The operational consequences extended beyond tactical victories. The mobility and coordination enabled by radios disrupted German supply lines and communication networks. Rapid advances left enemy positions isolated. Ammunition and fuel depots fell before they could be secured, and retreating units were cut off or forced into chaotic withdrawals. Commanders were compelled to abandon defensive plans, improvising under constant pressure. The cumulative effect was an erosion of cohesion within German formations, a deterioration of morale, and an increasing inability to respond effectively to Allied maneuvers. From the American perspective, the radios enhanced both efficiency and resilience. Units could respond to unexpected developments without halting operations, rerouting tanks around obstacles, or providing timely support to embattled infantry. Artillery could be redirected within minutes, reconnaissance reports could be shared instantly, and reinforcements deployed exactly where needed. Every Sherman became not just a combat vehicle, but a communication hub, multiplying the impact of each engagement. Training and doctrine emphasized the integration of radio use, ensuring that crews understood both their own missions and the broader operational picture. The human dimension of this advantage was significant. Crews learned to operate under constant alert, balancing the technical operation of radios with navigation, gunnery, and battlefield awareness. Effective communication required discipline, clear voice procedures, and rapid interpretation of information. Officers relied on radio updates to make tactical decisions in real time, while lower-level commanders gained autonomy, empowered to act decisively without waiting for higher orders. This decentralized decision-making, enabled by reliable communication, accelerated operational tempo, and allowed the Allies to maintain relentless pressure on German forces. By late November, the radios in Sherman tanks had reshaped the conceptual understanding of armored warfare. Commanders recognized that coordination and information flow were as critical as armor and firepower. After-action reports emphasized that victories were won not solely through superior numbers or brute force, but through the ability to synchronize units across a dispersed battlefield. The success of radio-equipped Shermans influenced post-war doctrine, informing armor tactics and combined arms operations for decades to come. The psychological impact on both sides was equally profound. For American forces, the radios provided confidence and situational awareness, reducing uncertainty and improving morale. Soldiers knew that support was coordinated and responsive. For the Germans, the unrelenting pace, combined with the seeming prescience of American maneuvers, bred frustration and a sense of helplessness. The battlefield advantage had shifted. Initiative, once contested, now rested firmly with radio-equipped Allied armor. As the European campaign progressed, the advantage conferred by Sherman radios persisted. Supply lines remained secure, advances continued with minimal delay, and Allied forces maintained operational superiority. The integration of communication technology into armor doctrine had proven decisive, altering the conduct of battle and ensuring that the momentum gained in France and the Low Countries could be sustained. The story of the Sherman tank radios is a testament to the profound intersection of technology, human ingenuity, and strategic foresight. What might have seemed a small technical detail, a communication device installed in a tank, became a decisive factor in modern warfare. By enabling instantaneous coordination across miles of battlefield, these radios transformed the nature of armored operations, turning isolated engagements into orchestrated, fluid maneuvers. The battlefield was no longer a chaotic series of individual encounters. It became a stage where information flowed as rapidly as bullets and steel. This technological edge highlights a fundamental truth. Warfare is not determined solely by numbers or firepower, but by the ability to integrate human skill, machines, and strategy. Shermans with radios were more than vehicles. They were instruments of situational awareness, amplifying the capabilities of every crew member and commander. African-American drivers, mechanics, and support personnel of the era similarly exemplified this principle, demonstrating that human resilience, coordination, and adaptation are as decisive as technological innovation. The psychological dimension of this advantage was equally important. American forces gained confidence, acting decisively with knowledge of friendly unit positions and enemy movements. German troops, by contrast, confronted unpredictability and rapid adaptation, struggling to counter an enemy that seemed always a step ahead. The radios created a new form of battlefield dominance, where speed of decision and information superiority became as lethal as tanks or artillery. Beyond 1944, the legacy of the Sherman radios reshaped military thinking. Combined arms operations, mechanized doctrine, and armor tactics evolved to prioritize communication, coordination, and real-time responsiveness. The lessons learned extended into the Cold War and beyond, informing how armies approach mobility, command, and information management. Ultimately, the story is a reminder that victory in war often rests not only on visible heroics, but on the invisible threads that connect units, men, and machines. It demonstrates how foresight, preparation, and the integration of technology and human effort can amplify capability beyond expectations. The Sherman tanks of World War II, silent yet powerful communicators on the battlefield, exemplify how ingenuity, coordination, and relentless execution can redefine the limits of warfare. The radios of these tanks did not merely transmit signals. They transmitted the very advantage that allowed Allied forces to dominate, shaping history in ways German commanders could neither foresee nor counter. July 1944. Normandy's sun scorched the bocage, casting harsh shadows over shattered hedgerows and bombed-out villages. The ground trembled under the rumble of Sherman tanks, engines growling as armored columns crept through narrow lanes, mud and dust spraying behind steel tracks. Inside each tank, the crews worked in tense synchrony, hands on levers, eyes scanning for movement, ears straining for orders over the static-filled radio channels. For the Germans, the advance seemed chaotic, a blur of green-painted armor appearing and disappearing between hedgerows. What they could not see, what they could not anticipate, was the invisible web connecting every Sherman tank, every armor command post. Radios crackled with constant updates, positions of enemy forces, calls for artillery, rerouted advances, and urgent tactical decisions. American units moved as if guided by an unseen hand, each maneuver coordinated, precise, unstoppable. In that moment, the advantage was not just in guns or armor. It was in information. Every German soldier caught off guard, every hedgerow bypassed, was a testament to technology that the enemy would never fully comprehend. The battlefield itself had become a network, and the Sherman's advanced radios were its heartbeat. The war of bullets and shells had found a new ally, the war of communication. By mid-1944, the Western Front was a crucible of strategy, firepower, and logistics. The Allied invasion of Normandy in June had established a tenuous foothold on French soil. Beaches were secured, but the countryside beyond presented a formidable challenge. The bocage, a dense patchwork of hedgerows, sunken lanes, and small fields, favored defenders. German troops, familiar with the terrain, used it to stage ambushes, conceal artillery, and slow the advance of the American forces. Every village, every hedgerow became a potential death trap. The Sherman tank, the workhorse of the U.S. armored divisions, was central to breaking through this natural fortress. Standardized, mechanically reliable, and mass-produced, it could deliver mobility and firepower in a package the Allies could field in vast numbers. But its true advantage in 1944 was less obvious than the 75mm gun barrel or the tracks that churned through mud. It was the radio. American armored doctrine emphasized communication and coordination. Tank crews were trained not just to shoot and maneuver, but to operate as part of a networked force. Commanders at company and battalion levels could relay orders, request artillery support, or adjust formations in real time. Unlike many German panzer units, where radios were scarce and often reserved for officers, every Sherman and accompanying armored vehicle was equipped with a functional, reliable radio. The result was a battlefield awareness that transformed armored combat from a collection of isolated skirmishes into a synchronized, coordinated advance. The terrain magnified this advantage. Narrow lanes and hidden enemy positions demanded rapid response. A tank caught in a crossfire or an ambush could call for reinforcements instantly, reposition artillery, or signal infantry to assist. German forces, relying largely on visual signals, runners, or limited radio access, could not match this pace of communication. By the time they reacted to one flanking maneuver, American tanks had already exploited the next gap in their lines. Logistical support further reinforced this capability. Allied engineers repaired bridges and cleared obstacles quickly, enabling Shermans to maintain momentum. Fuel, ammunition, and spare parts were delivered with remarkable efficiency. But it was the radio network that allowed these resources to be used most effectively. Commanders could identify bottlenecks, reroute tanks, and ensure that firepower was concentrated where it mattered most. The battlefield became not just a contest of tanks and artillery, but a demonstration of information superiority. This technological edge extended beyond the immediate battlefield. Intelligence reports, intercepted communications, and reconnaissance flights fed into command decisions. Sherman radios allowed for rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. When a German counterattack emerged, American tank units could respond cohesively, redirecting armor, adjusting formations, and calling in supporting fire. Mobility and firepower were enhanced not simply by numbers, but by the speed and reliability of communication. German commanders observed the early stages of the Normandy campaign with growing frustration. They had encountered the Sherman before, but underestimated the integration of technology, training, and doctrine. Reports filtered back to Panzer headquarters of U.S. units maneuvering in ways that seemed to defy conventional expectations. Tanks were never alone. Artillery and infantry were coordinated seamlessly. Attempts to isolate or ambush armored columns often failed, not because German weapons were ineffective, but because the Americans operated as a connected system. The American emphasis on radios reflected a broader doctrinal shift. Mobility, speed, and combined arms operations demanded real-time coordination. Unlike the slower, more centralized German command structure, U.S. forces could decentralize decision-making without losing cohesion. Platoon leaders could act autonomously, adjusting to threats while remaining linked to the larger operational picture. The Sherman tank was no longer merely a weapon. It was a node in a network, a moving hub of situational awareness, and a force multiplier that German troops could not easily disrupt. By the end of July 1944, the stage was set for a transformation in armored warfare. German defenses, confident in their terrain advantage and tactical planning, were about to encounter a force that could see, communicate, and act faster than ever anticipated. The Sherman's radios, invisible but omnipresent, would prove decisive in turning Normandy from a contested beachhead into a launching point for a sweeping advance across northern France. As July turned into August 1944, the American advance through northern France gained momentum. Allied forces pushed beyond the Normandy beaches and the Bocage hedgerows,